Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Podcasting to you from a field here in beautiful rural Ireland. I'm Trev Downey, and this is the Transfer Show, where I am joined by my own personal transfer guru, Dave Davis. How you doing, Dave?
All the better for hearing you, bud. All the better.
Now, a listener, my pal Jay, told us that there's a great discrepancy between the sound of my voice and the sound of your voice in terms of the levels. And we haven't heard that from anyone else, but it seemed to be an issue. And I remember I said I'd just address it straight on. So just so everybody knows, I'm going to back away from the microphone a little bit so I'm not booming. I usually lean right into that mother. So I'm just going to back off a little bit because Dave's perfectly clear to me and I want there to be a sort of a continuity. So in case you're wondering, I'm literally taking a step back here. So we have so much to go through, man. It's fantastic. Let's start, as we should do, on our own doorstep with some LFC updates. And let's get to the stuff that we can confirm. The departure of a couple of players, one in a move, one in a loan, and a couple of others who we had spoken about this very topic still could be on the go or on the. We'll talk about one of them because he links into the midfield area later on. But let's talk Ben Davies. Let's talk Rhys Williams. Let's talk Sepp. Let's talk Nat.
Yeah, of course. So Ben Davies is it's a big move, but that's probably the wrong word, Trev, isn't it? It's a big move for him. It's up to £4 million to Rangers. I mean, for a guy that's never played and cost buttons, it just works well all round, doesn't it? So a tidy profit, even with a bit of a sell-on clause to Preston there. So that one's done. Rhys Williams, the first of a few that we think will head out on loan. So Blackpool, so Championship. Hopefully it goes better for him there than it did at Swansea. As you said, Sepp is one that we know he's had a load of inquiries. He's even had a few from the Liga and Bundesliga, we know as well, Trev. There's a lot of interest in Sepp van der Berg, especially. Nat similar as well. Nat a real mix of perm and loan inquiries. And then the latest one, which we've just seen break this morning, we mentioned it a few weeks ago. This is trying not to come across as smug and arrogant in any way. Tyler Morton's taken up one of those options, so he heads off on a season-long loan to Blackburn. So, a lot going on. We've done the shirt selling tour of Asia. We've done that now into the camp in Austria, and business is afoot.
It sure is, and I'm delighted you snuck in the Tyler Morton one right at the end. I cannot, despite my best efforts, ever catch you on this. I was going to just throw in the Tyler Morton news that I'd seen this morning to see if you had any sort of a different take on it, or if it even threw you slightly off your pace. But no, of course it doesn't. Of course you knew that was coming. And just to confirm, Tyler's gone where?
Blackburn, season-long loan.
Season-long loan to Blackburn. Excellent. And we spoke, didn't we, last week about whether it would be Rhys Williams or Nat Phillips who'd be the most likely, or indeed Sepp van den Berg who'd be the most likely to be kept around as our auxiliary number 5 centre half. You imagine one of them will, but now, as you say, there's a lot of interest around the young man. Rhys is gone. It mightn't be. It might end up being the strange and yet sort of kind of vaguely predictable thing that it will be Phillips who ends up not leaving. It'd be interesting to watch that because I can't see all three of them being allowed to go. Now, we have more interest and intrigue around the midfielder area. There is a very strong rumour around this morning about an incoming. And we also know that there's a fella who's involved in a sort of a chain link or domino effect in terms of an outgoing from our squad. So let's talk about Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and what his coming or going might mean for us and what the potential incoming might be that's being mentioned this morning. I'm going to leave you to work your way through that in a way that suits you, that you want to tie those pieces together, pieces which involve a certain young man called Sucic as well.
Yeah, chuck a hand grenade and run off, Trev. Cheers. But yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
sorry, pal.
It is all linked. It's the right to talk about it in that full context. So, yeah, what do we know? There has been inquiries. I'd say tentative, that famous word, inquiries initially for Ox, but naturally a lot of the suggestions seem to be that West Ham are now strongly interested in him, and we'll come on to a bit of why. There's not sort of top secret there realistically. So what knock-on effect does that have? Well, Klopp's been clear and the club have been quite clear. There's pretty much no midfielder coming in without one going out. So the start of the chain, as you described it there, Trev. So what naturally starts to ramp up this morning, it's not brand new talk, but Matheus Nunes talk is now afoot. It's across all timelines. I'm sure everyone's on it as we speak. I think the biggest thing to point out is that from the people we've been checking with, it does all seem to be coming from outside of the UK. That is important to know. And I think there's none of the golden trio, as in the Joyce, the Jones, the King have broken it, so to speak, yet. So that's something just to keep in mind. I think from a personal point of view, from the bits we know, and I know this sounds ITK, Trev, so apologies, but speaking to the people that we know, the chances of one coming off without the other going are pretty much non-existent. There's very little chance Liverpool put a Nunes on the wage bill without an Ox going, if that makes sense. So the two are intrinsically linked. There's no two ways about it. And then, yeah, the last name that you mentioned there, Liverpool are in Austria. They are having extensive talks, we're told, with Red Bull officials. Naturally, one of the names on the agenda there is Luka Sucic. It's been said a few times this summer, we have a distinct interest in him. He is on the agenda. Interestingly, we don't know who. I genuinely could just be guessing here, but apparently it's Sucic and one other we hold a serious interest in. And no, one other is nothing really quantitative. I totally appreciate that. But yeah, we know Sucic is a definite, is on the agenda.
Well, that's the kind of information though that tickles everybody, you know, and you know, it's if we're all perfectly honest, part of the whole transfer window thing that we like is it's the murder mystery aspect where it's a murder, isn't it? You know, it's who could that be? And I love that. That's kind of things that will get people's heads spinning around in hopefully a positive way. And to wrap up the Liverpool section, of course, one of the main things we needed to do was to firm up certain individuals and make sure they stayed around. And Mo Salah was the flagship one of those. But there are other people who we will obviously need to perform at a high level if we're going to have a chance to compete across all four competitions. And two of those are sort of squad stalwarts at this stage. None more stalwarty than Bobby Firmino, but obviously Naby Keita, a fella who divides a lot of opinion, but a fella who I think can all agree that if he's on top form is a massive addition to our squad. Is there any news on the much touted extensions or new contracts for those two chaps?
Yeah, it's an interesting one in a way. Keita, again, that from talking to people, that there is expected to be movement in the next few weeks. I know that's a weird phrase, movement, but that's what we're being told. So we'll keep an eye out for that. It wouldn't surprise me, and this is sort of gut putting myself on the line here, if it just kind of breaks, you know, like the Salah one did all of a sudden type of thing, that it's done and we get photos. Nothing likely till we get back from the Austria camp, so to speak, but that's the gut feeling I get from that. Bobby, yeah, we know, as we mentioned, like going back a few weeks ago, Bobby, his agent Klopp, had a bit of a sit down to sort of talk through where they were, where they are, what they want, being in the last 12 months. And the ball was very much in Bobby's court as to what he wanted to do, but made clear that, you know, Klopp, in more than happy, would like him to stay on that basis. So again, the suggestion is, and I don't really know how this will work, because I put my neck on the line a good few weeks ago saying I think it would drift out for 12 months, but I could be wrong on this, because the same source is telling us there's movement expected in that in a few weeks. Again, what that looks like, I'm not 100% sure, but it's hard to maybe think of anything other than renewal, isn't it, when you talk about movement, Trev? Because otherwise it's just rolling it down for 12 months, isn't it? So it'll be interesting to see where we stand in a few weeks on those two.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think these are the kind of things, you know, I'm famously disinterested or uninterested in the more pencil pushing aspects of the finances. That doesn't mean that I don't respect that they're real. Of course I do. I'm not an idiot. It's just something that it doesn't get my juices flowing the way it does, for example, other people. And I really respect people who actually have an insight into it and can tell you what X will mean and a knock-on effect for Y. But, you know, I always sort of I defer to the likes of Mo Chatter on that kind of stuff, and I'll take what he says and with a high degree of acceptance. So interesting to see how that figures into a lot of the chat between now and the closing of that window, because obviously people start, don't they, getting their backs up, Dave, about how the money is managed and used and all that type of thing. So it will be interesting, and we do at least then have some ongoing interests in terms of contracts and stuff like that for us in the window. And maybe, as you said earlier on, depending on how these dominoes fall, there may be some incomings and outgoings. We'll talk again about that one particular man, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, because he fits in, doesn't he, Dave, to some other general Premier League comings and goings. And why not start there with a story in the wider Premier League that might somehow involve Oxlade-Chamberlain, because we've seen Jesse Lingard being touted as a new Forest player. He's back, was the social media stuff. They've also added a couple of players I wouldn't mind you telling me about, because they're not names I was familiar with from Huddersfield. And I said to you before the mics went live, now that Lingard, who was linked to West Ham very strongly, is not going there, it's a sort of a wish of mine. If the guy's not going to play, I mean, if he's going to play and be competitive and be part of the squad, I'd love Ox to stay at Liverpool. But if he's not, I think a move makes sense for everybody. And West Ham have been always so generous to us, haven't they, Dave, with their money? So what do you think? What's going on around this whole Lingard, Oxlade-Chamberlain, the arrivals, the comings and goings there of Forest, and what that might mean for West Ham and then ultimately for us?
Yeah, I think probably that's the right move. We talk about it in terms of dominoes. And I suppose just for context setting the scene, a lot of the Premier League clubs, including us, let's not lie about it, the first tour is the shirt selling, the sponsorship arm. That's why usually, we go to America, Asia. The second part is when we come back to a European base. So we like Evian or Austria. So it's Austria that we've picked this time. And that's when the business really picks up. So a lot of clubs have started to do that. So for these dominoes, I suppose, Jesse Lingard, I mean, it was quite clear that Lingard wanted to necessarily, pretty much to go back to West Ham. However, Forest throw a bomb in there, don't they, in regards to the wages they'll offer. So naturally, Jesse then is on the blower with his agent to West Ham. What will you offer? And all the insight is they've not offered anywhere near what Forest have. So it's probably the key sign is that it's a 1-year deal. I mean, you don't hear that, Trev, do you really? A 1-year deal for a 29-year-old.
So weird. It's so weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly, especially the way they put it with largely bonus incentivized, which I could be getting this wrong, but you'd think it would lean towards Forest staying up naturally. And, that's part of the deal. So, he's chosen Forest over West Ham, clearly. So what does that mean? Well, West Ham are in the market for an attacking midfielder, and the strong links have been the Ox, tentative inquiries at one point, but naturally there's a suspicion that'll be firmed up, isn't it? So we'll wait to see if that does trigger, if that's the right phrase. And one thing that we really need to keep in mind, which is the unknown on this, Ox has not gone on tour, It's not really clear how bad that hammy is really yet, is it, the injury? So that could also play a part in the decision. But hopefully there is a dominoes and links, as we said there, that trigger things. Forest as well, still, for all the higher profile moves like a Lingard, they've also pinched a couple, Lewis O'Brien, Harry Toffolo, I think it's pronounced, from Huddersfield. So they are just making moves galore, Trev. Literally, if they're their owner's almost playing like champ man, isn't he? Which is good because it keeps our job interesting. But who'd have thought a promoted club would be up to 7 transfers already? Crazy business, isn't it? But interesting.
Interesting business, and maybe, dare I say it, kind of sensible looking business. So we'll see how they go. I know one or two people that we share in common as podcasting chums have comparative regard for Forest and what they're doing there. So be interesting to see what's happening now. To move to our absolute blockbuster pals in terms of this transfer window and giving us entertainment, Chelsea, a couple of stories here. One around about someone who's being told he's not going away from the club, but more to the point, this ongoing, let's be honest, tremendously entertaining circus around De Jong and Barca and Manchester United and Chelsea and all the rest of it. So much going on around Chelsea at the moment, and they're still sort of connected to this De Jong thing, which is, like I say, an ongoing joy to all Liverpool fans. Some of the quotes coming out about it, fantastic. But let's focus on the Chelsea angle. Koundé and De Jong are two people we spoke about. Kimpembe we talked about last week as well. Azpilicueta going, you mentioned last week as well. That might still happen. A lot going on, but also a player who is definitely staying despite what his agent might say. So loads to talk about there, and I don't want to dictate what order you do it in. So talk me through what's happening there at Chelsea with the various people, and if you want, I can go back and pick up on any one of them you want.
God, I always feel I need to take a deep breath before we talk about Chelsea on this show. There's so much to cover. There always is. So, starting on Koundé. I mean, this is an interesting one. Chelsea have got an offer on the table. Sevilla like it. You know, the agent likes it because it's more money than a certain club are offering, which we'll come on to. Who doesn't like it? The player. So why are we talking there? Barcelona is Koundé's first choice. They're absolutely his first choice. He wants to go there. He's made it clear. He's stalling Chelsea, for want of a better word, Trev, to be honest. Probably is the right word in all honesty. So why is he stalling them? Because Barca need another payday loan type of deal, don't they, to make it happen? So they've told him they want it, it's clear, but they just haven't got the cash right now. As they call it, the economic lever, that famous phrase, has not been pulled yet. So it's an interesting one. Does Koundé continue to stall? Because his agent's thinking, what are we doing here? Let's just make the move. But a fascinating one to see what happens there. Again, he's probably another one, if he does go to Chelsea, probably doesn't want to necessarily be there. But, you know, I'm sure there's many, many hundreds of thousands of reasons a week why you'd take that move still. De Jong, we've said it before. I mean, some of the quotes have been absolutely brilliant. He's told Manchester United to go away and leave him alone. I mean, that's just brilliant. Some of the sort of stories that are coming out. Not sure I believe it fully, but again, we also know that Chelsea hold an interest in him still. But Chelsea have got a lot of things to sort, as we say at the moment, but they've definitely still got an interest in De Jong. 99% certain that push came to shove, he's going to choose Chelsea over United if that comes onto the table. But fascinating. Kimpembe, they're still talking about him, and another left-sided centre-half, so we're still paying Pokemon catch them all that way. Azpilicueta, it's an interesting one, isn't he? He's an absolute stalwart at that club, but it is possible that he still might get the move to Barca that, you know, he's not going to push for because he's loved there, but he would like that move across. And then the franchise moves are still happening, as we say. And the biggest problem that they've got there at the moment, Trev, they can't shift what Chelsea would class as dead wood. You know, like the Werners, the Pulisic, that type of player. They've got some good players who, let's be honest, they'd be stars at a lot of clubs. Yeah. They can't shift them. Why can't they shift them, Trev? Because who's going to pay the wages Chelsea, you know, pay them at the moment? If those players are going to move, they're going to get offered, you know, some of them less than half of what they're on. So they're not going to move unless Chelsea subsidise it, I suppose is the right word as well, isn't it? So God knows what will happen at Chelsea. Hopefully, in my perfect eyes, it's a squad of 56 players that all hate each other. That would be our perfect scenario, realistically, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. But honestly, there's never going to going to be a dull week where we aren't talking about Chelsea in one way. And then, interestingly, a player that does want to shift, almost the irony of that, but now they're sort of stalling because, they do like the option of him. Broja, I think it's pronounced, isn't it? The guy that was at Southampton last season on loan, who really shone. West Ham and others are lurking, but for some strange reason, they finally got one that wants to go, and they're not keen on selling him. So just another joyous element in the Chelsea story. And then Timo Werner, God bless him, said, I'd like to go somewhere where I could be really happy. And when I think, I know, cue the tears for a guy who sold his soul for 285,000 a week type of thing. But yeah, Tommy Tuchel, as he said, maybe quite interestingly, surprised he's not really happy here with, his contract and bits, which feels like a little bit of a dig, doesn't it, Trev? Which you can understand. So all in all, in summary, it's not a happy cap, but God, it's fun to watch, isn't it, Trev? Let's be honest.
It really is, and let's just stall the proverbial digger here for a second, whilst I just throw something at you, which it is just an opinion thing, Dave. So I'm just curious, and consider this my standard once a week old man shouts at cloud moment, and it's just something you said there that really, as the kids would say, it triggered me. I was just thinking, right, okay, so, the rationale, why would they move elsewhere for less money? And you think about some of these contracts and you think about the outrageous levels that they're at now, and how you're talking about generational wealth for families after a year. It's bananas. Does it not stick in your craw that is the situation? And do you think really in some cases it might be actually out of the hands of the player because they're part of this bigger machinery involving agents and clubs and the business that is football? I wonder, is the autonomy of the player even a thing? I mean, I wonder if the likes of Timo Werner realized, okay, I had my gluttonous eyes bigger than my belly phase, and now I want to go somewhere and play football and be loved again, and be happy, as little Timo says, and I'll happily take half the money to do it. I wonder, is that even an option for a footballer these days? What's your understanding around that?
I think there's a point to it. I think there's a few elements to the whole context, though. I think the one thing that gets forgotten more than anything is, listen, we love football, don't we? We love watching football. We love watching the red, that type of thing. Not all footballers love football. We have to remember that. It is a business to a lot of them. There's quite a lot of footballers who don't watch football in their spare time or have any interest in it. That's just factual. It is almost a business, a career to them, that type of thing. They don't have that affinity, never mind to clubs, football to start with. So there's got to be an acceptance that there are hired guns, for want of a better phrase, within football, a good number of them. So that's the first point. The second point is, if you observe this linking to the first point, if you think back to that first point, we would naturally assume, listen, surely you want to play football, the love of a game. Well, if you're treating it as a business, Trev, and one club's giving you 100 grand to play for them, and one club will give you 200 grand to occasionally play for them, the business case is pretty easy there, realistically, isn't it, at the same time? But I do get what you're saying, because it does stick in our throat a bit, which is like, why wouldn't you want to go and play football? There's still plenty of clubs that would take you. But I think in the nicest way, clubs, and I include us in that, we use that when it suits us and we discard the player when it doesn't, if that makes sense. There is a hypocrisy to it, doesn't it? Like, why won't you stay? You love the club type of thing. But when we want to get rid of them, we're quick to, boot them out, shall we say, or forget relationships. There's that element of hypocrisy at the same time. I know what you're saying, though. For me, from a football point of view, why wouldn't you just want to play football? Why wouldn't you just want to, at whatever level you can, play week in, week out? But is football a sport? I won't really say so now. Top level football's a business, isn't it, Trev? And that's what it comes down to.
I think that's eminently your appraisal on your part. Fair play for it. Appreciate that. Let's continue. We have sort of a Chelsea link in the form of Nathan Aki, who was a target for them. But Cucurella now for City is being chased. Being chased by City, and Pep Guardiola has come out with some sort of quote where he said something along the lines of, "We're in negotiations. If it doesn't happen, we have alternatives." He mentions Cancelo. He mentions Wilson as brand, a young talent. He says Aki can play there. Now that would mean very much that it looks like that Nathan Aki thing is done and dusted in terms of him being available to go elsewhere. The Cucurella one is of interest for sure, and it's not a bad point for us to jump off, because there's another outgoing we spoke about last year, Zinchenko heading to Arsenal from City, and Tavares to Brighton on loan. Maybe talk to us about those moves.
Yeah, they are all interlinked. It seems to be, I don't want to say just left-back dominoes, because I think Zinchenko, surprisingly, is going to be looked at by Arsenal as a midfield option, a serious one as well. But yeah, if we sort of start with Zinchenko, it looks like Arsenal have picked him as to add a bit of steel and cover the left-back position, obviously with the concerns over Tierney that way. So he'll be a multifunctional player for them. It all seems done and dusted. Cucurella is a weird one, because we mentioned him right at the start of the transfer window, and everyone expected this to be done by now, in all honesty. I think what is absolutely fascinating, the price early on was said around 50 million. City coming in at 30-ish opening bid. I mean, come on. If ever there's a club that overpays for fullbacks, you can't start being picky now, City. Do you know what? They'll throw away 50 million on a fullback without even thinking, So it's interesting they've gone a low ball tactic, and like you said, the Pep comments come out to try and limit that. So if you think one leaving City, one going across to City, one leaving Brighton potentially in Cucurella, so who do Brighton line up? Well, of course, let's just add an Arsenal full-back to the chain to make the three clubs interlinked of Arsenal, Brighton and City. Nuno Tavares, yeah, and a guy who, let's be honest, hasn't really shone or been that important to Arsenal. So it looks like Brighton are in for him. Talk initially of a loan with an option to buy seems to be the strong suggestion. So, yeah, Arsenal, City, Brighton, Trev, all seem interlinked, which we used that phrase earlier, didn't we? A chain. So just makes you think, if one part breaks down, what happens to the others?
Yeah, and of course that is very much the story of the transfer window and how things operate. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Pep is drawing a line in the sand there, because he probably has. I know he's highly rated, Cucurella, but perhaps he's just decided, well, it's a squad player. Now I have to grow some sort of financial conscience. Who knows how that will even end up. And my bad, actually, I should have mentioned while we're on the topic of Chelsea that there are further sort of difficulties there for them in terms of firming up two very essential first teamers in terms of Mason Mount and Reece James, who have contracts that need to get sorted, but all may not be 100% well there.
Yeah, probably could have mentioned it in the earlier context. So Chelsea have got the problems, we say. They can't shift the people they want to, realistically, because of their wages. Their other side is they want to obviously renew, probably their two youngest British stars. I think that's a fair comment, isn't it? James and Mount. Problem they've got on that side is James and Mount's agents are not stupid. They've seen what Raheem Sterling's been paid and what others are coming in on. So they want absolute top dollar, which makes sense. But naturally, a club does not want to put young stars on absolute top dollar while they can't shift out the very, very, well, maybe the most expensive deadwood in history, so to speak, in Chelsea's squad. So it's just kind of not a delay, but there's just a bit of a tightrope being walked at the moment, because naturally they're telling these players, of course we want you to stay, you're the jewels in our crowns type of things, but they're not exactly putting the money on the table. Why are they not? Because they can't shift the deadwood, Trev. So if the deadwood goes, for whatever reason, I'd expect to see advancements made on those things and pen to paper quite quickly. But if that does happen, it'll be for some whacking dosh a week, put it that way.
Yeah, and of course this is all under the new management, so they're going to be moving at different paces and have different priorities. So more to watch there in the ongoing summer sideshow that is Chelsea. We have two more clubs in the Premier League who are doing bits. We'll start with Crystal Palace, who have been having a look at Chris Richards from Bayern, and Mr. McNeil is also up and high on their list, but West Ham may have a word about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Palace, because I think there were many people's tips last year to go down, but they had a great year, didn't they, under Vieira, and some real stars came through, even breaking into the England team, and interesting moves, like you say, Chris Richards, an American centre-half from Bayern Munich, be interesting to see how he gets on, and then very much it does seem our old favourites, West Ham and Palace, down to the last two for Dwight McNeil, or one who, listen, many moons ago was talented as a potential, City, Liverpool, and probably says how far his stock's fallen, that half the price, I don't want to say half the clubs because that sounds terrible, doesn't it? But lower level clubs, so to speak, from a Premier League. But yeah, they're making subtle moves, Crystal Palace, and I'll back Vieira. I think if with McNeil comes off as well, I think those two could be quite good for them.
Yeah, I've not seen Richards, but I have always been quite impressed by McNeil. I think there's a footballer there, and might be just a different stage for him. It might work out quite well. Different manager, who knows? And finally, then, in terms of our Premier League focus, Leeds, who obviously need to be doing a few bits and pieces considering the outgoings. They're going to be looking for a few more footballers. There have been a couple of names mentioned. But again, that may not necessarily be straightforward because other clubs are involved. As we said earlier on, the theme of this show, the ongoing chain and the rival interests. So talk to me about what might be happening at Leeds just to finish up our Premier League focus for now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Leeds, because it's an easy link and it sounds like a cheap link, but it's not. Jesse Marsch, it almost has that Ted Lasso style honesty, doesn't he? He just gets asked and he's just quite honest about it. And he said, completely straight, yeah, we're 100% looking for a few more. And then journalists like him now because they'll throw names out and he goes, yeah, we like him, type of thing. So he always provides interest that way. I'm probably going to massacre this pronunciation, but the Belgian forward, Charles, I think it's pronounced De Ketelaere, could be massacring that, Trev, so apologies there. But yeah, very much a young forward that Marsh has confirmed they do like. AC Milan are also interested in him, but Leeds are definitely looking at forwards. If you think last year, couldn't really score a goal for Toffee. Patrick Bamford was injured for large parts of the season, wasn't he, as well? So they need forwards in that way. I know they've got Aronson, but doesn't really look like a major goal scorer, so they need options there. However, interestingly, Marsh was also quite honest that Newcastle have been in for Jack Harrison, which is surprising. I didn't really see him as a Newcastle player, especially their tactics. But interestingly, he labelled the bid insulting. So I don't know what that number is or what level that is, but the fact is Newcastle have made a bid for Jack Harrison and it insulted Leeds. So Leeds are probably going to be one of those clubs that, they'll end the summer, Trev, with like 10 in, 7 out type of thing. And we know a few have gone already for big numbers. So they are definitely shaking up their squad, so to speak. But yeah, keep an eye on Jesse Marsch because he doesn't tell lies. He will be quite open and honest, so makes our job more interesting.
Nice to see them changing up the vocabulary as well, that we've moved from the standard derisory offer to something that is now insulting. Fair play. I always like to keep an eye on these little details. The lexicon changes every so often. Let's widen our focus now, Dave, and have a look at what's going on. Before we finish the show, which we will do, go back to a club we've mentioned a few times already. We're trying to get around all of these, and today we're going to have a look at West Ham at the end. Obviously, things have changed even since you would have put these notes together, and we've acknowledged quite a lot of that earlier on. But it'll be interesting to just focus on them and get your take on how you think they're going to do, if they can make the next step and all that. But for now, let's look at Europe. And I like this section because it's the area in which I obviously have the least reach personally, because I don't follow these things as intently as some, and it's always interesting to find out what's going on. Now, Ajax is a club that's always churning over their playing stock, for want of a better word. There has been some movement inward and outward. Talk to us about what's going on at Ajax.
Yeah, an interesting one. So an incoming, so just just shy of 23 million. Calvin Bassey, so the young centre-half from Rangers. So interesting one. One of the ones that Rangers pinched from a Premier League club, Leicester, for a development fee, so around the set 450 grand mark, which is the agreement. Had a brilliant season, especially on their run all the way through to the Europa League. So yeah, Ajax have swooped in, and up to 23 million goes into the Rangers coffers, and Ajax get us, a supremely young, talented centre half. Just, I think, great business all round, because Rangers are a big club in football context. You couldn't deny that, but based on the SPL and the finances, they need to do those type of deals, don't they, to just sort of survive, replenish. So great businesses, and they take in 23 million for Calvin Bassey. And as we know, 4 of it goes straight back out on Ben Davies on a centre half as well, who's also left-footed. So yeah, it will be interesting to watch. I'd like to see how Bassey does it in sort of a higher level. That sounds terrible, but like a bigger league. I think it's fair to say, you'd probably say the Dutch league trumps Scotland, doesn't it, realistically? So be interesting to see how he does, but just, I think, good business for player, both clubs, everyone happy there.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I like that idea, and again, it's just, that sort of pattern of one in, one out, and chains and links, and Ben Davies going in there and then left with a healthy 19 million to start throwing around. It could make them sort of, that kind of move is such a rarity now for a Scottish club. It could make all the difference in terms of their domestic success and whether or not they can have another European campaign as impressive as the last one. Their rivals, Celtic, are also doing a little bit of moving and shaking. And the name Aaron Mooy's come up.
Yeah, a bit of a 3-year ago name type, isn't it? So yeah, Aaron Mooy, so Australian international. Probably the obvious link there is Celtic manager and Postecoglou, I think it's pronounced fully. Again, I'm probably butchering that, but yeah, got the connections there from national team. So it is a short-term deal, so up to 6 months, which, if you think, ties nicely into the World Cup, doesn't it? So probably be reviewed after that, but it's an interesting one because he probably at veteran age realistically, so don't know how he'll do, but again, as we said, it's trying not to be derogatory, but SPL, would think for that level he would be a good player. So free, what's the risk, Trev? Good addition all round.
So we've had a little stop off in Holland. We've called in on the train here in Scotland as well. Let's move to France now, and Monaco looking to do a little bit of a deal for a player that will be familiar to some people.
Yeah, it's like we've gone from the world's best stag do places to like where it's £20 a pint type of thing. So yeah, absolutely. So an interesting one, Samare, the Leicester midfield. There was a lot of eyes on this when it was first moved to Leicester, and a lot of people thought, how's Leicester got him? It's just not worked out at all, Trev, to be honest. So yeah, Monaco are in negotiations to bring him back to France, which I can understand, to be honest, because if they can get him back to what he was, so to speak, it's a brilliant move realistically. I think, yeah, a lot of people had Samare down last couple of years to be a real star, but it's just not worked out in the Premier League. So yeah, looks like they're getting ready to cut their losses on that one.
And if we continue our stop-offs, we'll move to a different part of the world now and have a look at Bayern Munich and what's going on there, because obviously there was a lot of talk about Mr. De Ligt. He is massively highly rated by a lot of people. Some have looked askance at the level of the admiration for him. But we also know that probably as a result of that, arrival, Pavard is up for sale.
Yeah.
And there's going to be more links and knock-ons, because that will bring us in that discussion towards Italy and our final port of call. But let's start with Bayern and Germany and talk to me about this De Ligt move, because a lot of people, like I say, rate this fella immensely highly, and obviously a lot of eyes were on this move or potential move.
Insane. Absolutely insane. How Juventus have conned Bayern out nearly 70 million for the Dutch Harry Maguire, Trev, I've genuinely no idea. but they have at the end of the day. Honestly, I know I know I'm opening myself up here, but one of the most overrated players in world football. I genuinely think that. So, yeah, they've made it clear they've wanted him. They've got him. The players wanted to go. So it's happy days in that sense all round. So, yeah, Bayern are very much a club that, as we know, membership plays a part. They know they have to balance the books to a certain extent. So Pavard is up for sale, has been touted around Europe, as we mentioned before, but now it's a solid touting. I think the probably injuries might count against him a little bit there, but I'd be surprised if there isn't takers, put it that way. So what have Juve done? I actually think this is a brilliant bit of business, especially from a club that normally operates sort of the free transfer retirement village. They've gone and got, or pretty much on the verge of getting, Gelson Bremer, the Torino centre-half, a player that, we've been linked with for a long time throughout history, one of those names that just kept coming up in the last few years. So a transfer fee around the £40 million mark. So, if you think there, you're selling De Ligt for about 70, you get Bremer in for around the 40 million mark. I just think that is brilliant business by Juventus. I really do. Let's be honest, De Ligt hasn't torn up any trees whatsoever in Turin. So an interesting one. Pavard, I do think he moves. That wage bill of Bayern's has got inflated all the time, hasn't it? They're not known as big payers, but Sané in the last few years, they've just renewed Gnabry on bigger wages. De Ligt's not coming for a $5 a week, is he? Put it that way. Sadio Mane, inflated, big wages as well. We know the impact. We've talked about that to death. And no one's going to tell me that, Lewandowski's done. But that's one player, Trev. That's one player going and 3 ones coming in or increasing their wages. So there's got to be a little bit of book balancing, for want of a better phrase there. So I think you will see Pavard move on. But yeah, interesting moves by Bayern Munich. I've got my opinion on them, as I've just shared, but transfer merry-go-round rumbles on in Europe.
The interesting thing about Bayern is they have this sort of default reputation. I've heard yourself say it. I've expressed similar opinion myself, and I know your namesake, young Hendrik, has said it as well about how well run they are, and possibly, if you take all things into consideration, we're in a position where it's probably us and Bayern as the most tidiest run clubs on the continent. So it's hard to see Bayern making a cock up in terms of a big move, but I will watch that with great interest, I have to say, because like yourself, the guy's reputation's always seemed better than what I was actually seeing on the pitch. There was that wonderful run where he was at the heart of that Ajax team who went on the Champions League run, and he did come off very well on that. And I remember thinking, okay, well, he seems to be a unit, and that's important to Kloppo, and blah, blah, blah. So we'll watch that with interest, primarily because you'd really be cocking an eyebrow if Bayern had gone askew in terms of their book balancing, as you mentioned. But there is one more thing to talk about in terms of our European stop-offs, and that's Paulo Dybala, who's off on a free to Roma. And this one had a lot of people literally scratching their heads going, hang on, about what now? Because he's one of those names that was linked with everybody at one point. So what's your insight into what's actually happened there?
I think I'd almost describe him as the ultimate FIFA player. Youngsters, like sound 100 years old. Like people of a certain age, let's put that, will buy, the team games, and he's a name, isn't he? But the name is well above the ability. He's been injured galore for the last few years. He's been injured more than he's played. He's not really torn up any sort of trees when he has actually played. I think, being honest, sort of the profile, Argentine off number 10, I think, maybe people think that it might have been the next Messi, as he was touted at one point, but it's just never really happened, and he's not young. And it's telling, Trev, like, as you said, all the names were linked with him. Funny how none of them have taken a chance on him on a free. Remember that, on a free as well. And we heard of some ridiculous wage demands, but look where he's ended up, Trev. Roma. Roma are not ginormous payers. We know that. Let's not pretend that for one instant. So he left Juventus on a free, and he's gone to Roma. Now, I'm not sort of disparaging those clubs. Those are big names in world football still, but the reputation is there more than the luster or the current side, isn't it, really? So I think it just shows like where he is at the moment. It's a name more than a player, shall we say.
Well, let's take our final leg of the journey on the show here back in the more cosy environs that we're familiar with, and we'll go to London and we'll have a look at West Ham, because they're at such an interesting stage of their development. I have to say, because I had my opinion altered by listening to someone I respect in the shape of Jan Molby talking about how he actually really admired David Moyes as a football man, someone who really knew his onions, kind of thing. Moisey's been such a figure of derision for us for obvious reasons. You can't be Everton manager and then Man United manager and not expect to get down the glen from Liverpool fans and to have your reputation and your abilities questioned. Yeah. But, you have to admire what he has been doing there for a while at that club. And a lot of people would be of the opinion that they could possibly make that leap to where they were for a brief period in the mid-'80s, where they were battling for the title with Liverpool. Yeah. At one stage where they had Frank McAvenny and Tony Cottee and all those guys. Do you think that's a potential jump for them to make? Can they really elbow out their London rivals there in the shape of Arsenal and Spurs and make that step?
It's a tough one, and it almost sounds horrible to say. They've almost been trying to break that ceiling, haven't they? They've always been the closest one, that might disrupt the Champions League, Europa places, that type of thing. They've always been the one on the verge of that. And, there's been some real stars come out there or develop there, haven't they? Like Bowen, who we've had an interest in, Antonio, that type of thing. I just think it's reached a critical point, and I actually think they might start to not struggle, Trev, but I think they're going to now turn away from that ceiling. The reason I'm saying that is, if you look at everyone around them, like you said, the Spurs and Arsenals, they're the easiest ones to look at. Look how much money those two clubs have spent this summer. Absolutely huge sums, got the player. They've got that ability to go again. West Ham have to be more careful. They don't have that type of finance. So you look at what they tried to do. I mean, Moyes has been really open on that. Moyes has said the other week, we want about 5 more in. I mean, that's not a small number, is it, Trev? We want 5 in. That's telling me, you want a lot of additions there. Quite clear as well, they wanted Lingard. It's no secret. You understand why. He had a great loan there. It totally made sense all round. Everyone expected them to get Lingard. He's at Forest now, isn't he, on the strangest 1-year deal ever type of thing. So that then makes you think, like, what? They're not getting Lingard, but if you want to break into that top bracket, let's call it that, the top bracket, the top 4, if you want to call it that, you're going to need to spend money, and you're going to have to probably pay a bit more than you want to if you want to really have a go at that. But they've been firm, they're not going to give Lingard the wages he's getting at Forest. So that then creates the issue. I mean, they've brought in and I'm probably butchering his name. I think Neaf Aguerd, I think it was, £30 million defender. He's in the door. That looks a good signing on paper. Onana at Lille, the midfielder, another one that looks a good signing, but he's a link rather than a signing at this stage. Bro, as we said at Chelsea, they all look like decent signings. I can't deny that. If you say they're decent, yeah, they look like good signings. I don't think decent's going to cut it for them, though, Trev. Being honest, if you want to really push into that, top 4 bracket, really disrupt the biggest names at the top, you're going to need to push the boat out. And my honest thought was, being honest, Lingard would be a key trigger for me. And I use that word trigger because if they got him, we knew it would be on a bit bigger wages than they normally want to pay. And for all the TikTok nonsense that goes on and etc., he has still got, he had a great season there. There's ability, England international. So it made a statement for me. The fact that they've not got him, they're still just talking about links, and Moyes has been pretty clear that, he wants 5 in. That's not small numbers, is it? 5. I just think it sounds terrible, Trev, but I think this might just be the season where repeat wouldn't be bad, if that makes sense. You know, if they ended up about 6 or 7, I think that again is a decent achievement. I just wonder how West Ham see it when your manager's telling you he wants 5 in. They're not getting the names. They couldn't get Lingard over the line and it's not saying this in a derogatory way, but Nottingham Forest. I think that tells you that the profile Moyes wants in against what they can get. I don't think it'll be the greatest summer for West Ham fans. And this sounds even worse, doesn't it, to say it? I'm not convinced West Ham are going to be sort of fans are jumping from the roof when they hear the name of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as the second option either, but could be wrong on that. But long story short, yeah, I think West Ham maybe just struggle to break into that top tier.
And does it change for you if they were able to get an Onana over the line, if they could convince Broja to come? Is it merely down to them getting what Moyes wants in terms of 4 or 5, but obviously 4 or 5 names that will excite and 4 or 5 people that will fit the system that he's trying to play there? Is there a way where your assessment would change by the end of the transfer window if they were to go and do the business? Or do you think they need to make, you talk about making a splash, and of course, you know, people can argue about Lingard's actual ability till the cows come home, but I understand the point you're making. It would have been sort of a sign of intent, whether you like the player or not. You kind of that intent to say, right, we're going to go for this next level. Do you think if they get a couple of those signings, or maybe if they achieve Moyes' target of 4 or 5 quality incomings, that they could actually then make that jump?
Yeah, I think if we take it as 5 incomings, that's what Moyes wants. I think you'll probably struggle, as though it sounds terrible, as a West Ham to get 5 real top ones. But I mentioned those names. If you did get Onana in and Broja, I think those are really good signings. It starts to beef out the squad a little bit as well. Especially what it means is when Antonio, you know, maybe has an injury or a layoff, you're thinking, well, now they've got quality, which is what the top teams have in it. Let's be honest, Trev. It's not always the starting 11. It's what comes behind that. That's maybe what West Ham have lacked a little bit as well. Onana really gives them that sort of stability in midfield. You know, he is a good player, but a warrior as well. So alongside Declan Rice, you'd start to look and think, hold on, that's not looking bad. So it really is a big few weeks, I think, for West Ham. If they don't necessarily need to get the 5 in, but if Onana and Broja came in, I'd be thinking, actually, that's looking pretty decent. That's a real bolster to the first team squad, and you know, a few others we'll see. But they'll either get them, and I think, they're going to solidify there. They may ruffle a few feathers. If they don't, 7th would be achievement, just being honest on that.
Hard to argue with any of your conclusions there, man, I have to say. And wow, we have ridden that train around a lot of destinations today. A lot of information there, and I hope, you know, it's one of the things I enjoy about this show is that it is bite-sized bits, but we do try to draw those connections between the various players and point out if this domino falls and that one might be next. And I think that's been very much the theme of today's show, and probably will be between now and the end, because that's how these things happen. One thing has to happen for another to happen. Loads of information for folks today, Dave. So as ever, thanks very much, man.
No problems at all. Pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.